Exposed, the incredible truth behind Hitler's final 48 hours, a hidden account that will change everything. Jake stood in the dim light of the bunker, the air thick with a stifling silence punctuated only by distant explosions that shook the ground beneath his feet. At just 22, he felt the weight of his family name pressing down on him, the legacy of heroes molded in the fires of battle. He could hear his grandfather's voice echoing in his mind, recounting tales of valor and patriotism. But now, as Jake surveyed the crumbling walls around him, these stories felt distant, almost like illusions fading in the smoke of war. He stumbled upon a dusty, leather-bound diary tucked away in a corner, half hidden beneath a pile of rubble. Curiosity gnawed at him. He reached out, brushing off the dust and revealing the name Helga embossed in gold on the cover. With shaky hands, he opened the diary, and the words flowed out like blood from a wound, raw, honest, and achingly beautiful. Every entry unveiled her heart, narrating her secret life, a courageous woman risking everything to save Jewish families from the nightmare surrounding them. "I saw a child with tears on the brink of hope," she wrote, "and in that moment, I understood that everyone deserves a chance." The weight of her tears felt heavy on Jake's chest, contrasting sharply with the orders he had received. Here was a truth unlike any enemy he had been prepared to face. "Before we continue, I need to let you know about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, hit that bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can drop a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue." As he read on, the darkness around him felt lighter, illuminated by the courage and resilience in her words. Helga spoke not only of fear but also of love, unwavering bonds amidst the chaos that echoed through Berlin's streets. "Each life we save is a flicker of hope," she noted, and as her narrative unfolded, Jake's heart began to race with an unfamiliar turmoil, creating a dizzying blend of admiration and conflict. Her story clashed violently with the forced ideals he had been raised upon. Suddenly, the rattle of machine guns outside reverberated closely, turning his thoughts chaotic. He had a choice to make. The same sense of duty that drove him to fight for his country now battled against the urge to protect Helga's story, a story that could change the perception of enemy and ally alike. To expose her truth would be a call of honor, but would it bury the life she fought to protect? This question clawed at him, threatening to unravel everything he believed. Jake closed the diary, engulfed in a storm of thoughts, when boom! The ground erupted beneath him, dust and debris fanning out like a sinister firework. In that harrowing moment, with the rancid smell of smoke clouding his senses, Jake felt the world shift. Time was not on his side. This was chaos, and every heartbeat led him toward a decision that would not only affect him but also those souls who dared to dream of freedom amid despair. Should he uphold his family's legacy, or carve a new chapter born from empathy in the heart of a war-torn city? As he braced himself, a flicker of Helga's truth lingered in his mind, begging to be cherished. The diary rested in his hand, a living testament of love wrapped in the shadows of conflict, leaving him teetering on the edge of a world that could redefine his understanding of heroism forever. Everything. Jake's heart raced, pounding like the distant artillery outside. He had thought bravery was simply the act of taking a gun to battle, facing the enemy head-on. But now, he realized something more profound was at play. A different kind of courage was waiting to unfold. He looked down at Helga's diary, the words beckoning him, daring him to take action, to choose a path less traveled. The shouts and gunfire surged closer, but Jake felt strangely anchored in that moment. What would his grandfather think of him, standing here with a truth whispered through time, overshadowed by the blaring chaos of war? The choice felt monumental, like a boulder teetering on the edge of a cliff. Would he push it off, allowing the weight of history to reshape the future, or would he step back, choosing safety and familiarity? A flicker of movement caught his eye. A shadow darted past the entryway as nearby buildings splintered under bombardment. Panic surged in him. The world was collapsing around him, but he couldn't just ignore Helga's truth, not now. He clenched the diary tightly. It was a lifeline in the storm, a chance to break free from the rigid beliefs that had shaped him. "Jake!" A voice echoed in the chaos, pulling him back. It was Roman, his platoon leader, a man marked by experience and a burning need for survival. "We have to move. Now." Roman's urgency spilled over into Jake's thoughts. The bunker was no place for hesitation. Yet, what would he sacrifice to heed that call? "I can't leave yet," Jake shouted back, his voice nearly swallowed by the roar of artillery. "There's something I need to protect." His own words shocked him, but a buried resolve was bubbling to the surface. Roman's eyes widened, scanning the room as though he could physically wrestle this revelation from Jake. "Protect? You're talking about the enemy, Jake. You could throw everything away." Roman challenged, the conviction in his voice heavy enough to slice through the restlessness surrounding them. Jake locked eyes with him, feeling a mix of fear and newfound resolve. "No, Roman. You don't understand, it's not just about sides anymore." As he spoke, the realization hit him like a slap. This wasn't merely about Helga's survival, it was about his own awakening. It was about choosing humanity over conflict, showing that love could bloom even in the darkest corners of war. Before Jake could say more, the ground shook violently, forcing both men to crash to their knees. Dust clouding around them, Jake gasped for air, the journal slipping from his grip but landing open, pages fluttering wildly like trapped birds. The word seemed to scream at him, shouting for recognition in the madness. "What's happening?" Roman shouted over the cacophony, panic creeping into his voice. Jake didn't answer. He lunged toward the diary, reaching for the fragile pages. Before his fingers could grasp it, another explosion sent a cloud of debris hurtling their way, knocking him back. He rolled, instincts kicking in, his heart racing faster than the ensuing chaos. He felt the sting of danger, but amidst it all, he sensed something changing within. Was he truly ready to stand for something greater than tradition? To align with a truth that contradicted everything he had been taught? With a heavy breath, amidst the dust and smoke, Jake made his decision. He would not let Helga's story go unheard. He would find her, learn more, and, if necessary, defy every expectation placed upon him. The ground continued to rumble, and in a moment of eerie stillness, he grabbed Roman's shoulder, pulling him into the eye of the storm. "We're going to help them," he said, more to himself than to Roman. They rose together, two soldiers forged in the face of unfathomable choices, and stepped into the chaos of a changing world. Just then, through the haze, a faint scream pierced the air, panic mixed with desperation. Jake turned to Roman, urgency dancing in his eyes. "We need to move. Fast." What awaited them outside the bunker could very well change everything they thought they knew about courage, sacrifice, and humanity. Did they have what it took to stand against the tide? As they braced themselves for the unknown, everything hung in the balance: fate, truth, and a flicker of hope that just wouldn't go out. Jake burst through the bunker doors, adrenaline surging through his veins. The world outside was a kaleidoscope of chaos, each sound sharper, every sight more intense. Smoke billowed in the air, transforming the once familiar cityscape into a war-torn ghost town. Cries for help echoed like a haunting melody, tugging at his heartstrings. "Stay close," Roman barked, his voice a grounding force amidst the turmoil. They maneuvered as best they could, keeping low, dodging crumbling debris that threatened to fall with each shaking blast. Jake's eyes darted around, scanning for both danger and, hopefully, the source of that piercing scream. Who needed help? What choices had led them here? As they rounded a corner, the scene opened up, revealing a group of civilians huddled behind the remnants of what used to be a bakery. Dust and fear mixed in the air, painting despair on every face. A woman, cradling a young child, was trembling, her eyes wild and searching. Jake felt his heart lurch. This was what it meant to choose humanity over conflict. "Roman, we have to," he began, but his words were cut short as a thunderous explosion erupted nearby, sending a shockwave that sent them both sprawling to the ground. Jake shook his head, trying to clear the haze. "We can't just leave them," he pleaded, desperation clawing at him. Roman hesitated, watching Jake with concern. "We're soldiers, we have a mission." Roman shot back, tension radiating from him. But something in Jake's gaze, a conviction lit by the diary, began to erode Roman's resolve. "Not today," Jake insisted, his voice steadier than he felt. "Today, we protect those who can't protect themselves." In that moment, Roman's tough facade began to crack. He locked eyes with Jake, his breath heavy and weary. "I never thought," but before he could finish, another cry echoed, more urgent, more fiery. The child in the woman's arms had begun to wail, piercing through the chaos, twisting Jake's insides. Without waiting for approval, Jake dashed towards them, heedless of the risks. He could feel Roman's presence behind him, a mix of fear and something else, perhaps admiration or newfound courage, bubbling beneath the surface. "Hey!" he called out to the terrified woman. "We're here to help. Let us get you out of here." The woman looked up, eyes wide and shimmering with uncertainty and fear. "Are you soldiers?" she asked, her voice trembling. "We're not your enemies," Jake assured her, kneeling down to be at eye level with both her and the frightened child. "We're here to get you to safety. Can you trust us?" For a heartbeat, the world around them faded as she seemed to weigh her options. The sound of yet another explosion rattled the ground beneath them, breaking the spell. "Please!" Jake pressed, desperation spilling from every pore. "We can't let fear win. You deserve more than that." The woman took a shaky breath, her resolve visibly softening. "Okay," she whispered, nodding cautiously, a glimmer of hope sparking in her eyes. He reached for her hand, and she took it, rising to her feet with her child instinctively clinging to her. Roman moved to help, instinctively scanning the area for other civilians. Together, they began leading the frightened group toward what they hoped was safety, but danger was always lurking amidst the adrenaline and hope. The shadow of violence loomed ever closer. Another rumble echoed through the streets, followed by the distant thud of boots and shouts that signaled enemy movement. They were running out of time. "Jake, we need to hurry," Roman urged, urgency in his voice. They sprinted down alleys and past shattered storefronts, weaving through the carnage as a sense of purpose propelled them forward. With each step, Jake felt his old life slipping further away. This newfound mission was shaping him, redefining what it meant to be brave. They turned a corner, and Jake's heart sank as they stumbled into a blockade. Heavy troops guarded the area, guns aimed at anyone who dared approach. Jake stopped short, panic flooding his system. "Roman," he whispered, feeling the icy fingers of fear wrap around his heart. Roman clenched his jaw, looking back at the civilians behind them, their expressions filled with dread. Jake's mind raced. What could he do next? Suddenly, instinct kicked in. With every ounce of determination he could muster, he stepped forward, hands raised high. "We're not your enemies. Just let them through." Time seemed to stretch like a rubber band, as if the world held its breath. Would they listen? Would they understand? As Jake took a step closer to the troops, the sound of pounding boots echoed behind him. Fear gripped him, yet he felt something new threading through his veins, a radical hope ignited by Helga's words. Would they let it burn bright, or would they smother it before it had a chance to flourish? In that instant, everything hinged on his next move. All he wanted was to protect those who could not protect themselves. But what would be the cost of that choice? Jake remained poised on the edge of uncertainty, ready for what might come next in this harrowing tale of courage and humanity. Jake stood there, feeling the weight of the moment bearing down on him. Every heartbeat echoed in his ears, drowning out the chaos that surrounded them. The tension thickened as he stared into the eyes of the soldiers standing guard. A mixture of confusion and rage flashed across their faces. They were trained to fight, but here was Jake, confronting them with vulnerability and a plea laced with humanity. "Let them through," he shouted again, his voice unwavering. He glanced back at the woman and her child. Their eyes were wide with fear, clinging to the hope he had offered. He could feel the urgency radiating from Roman, shifting uneasily at his side, but Jake held his ground. One of the soldiers barked a command, shaking Jake from the fight-or-flight impulse that surged within him. "Step back!" the soldier yelled, adjusting his grip on his weapon. "No!" Jake shouted, pushing the boundaries of his own fear. "We're not your enemies. We just want to save them." A deep silence settled in, punctuated only by the distant sounds of war, the heavy clang of metal, the muffled cries of those left behind, and the smoke that seemed to weigh heavier with each breath. Suddenly, the lead soldier lowered his weapon slightly, eyes searching. "They're civilians?" he questioned, skepticism lining his voice. "Yes," Jake affirmed, desperation rising like a tide. "They aren't part of this conflict. They need a way out. You have to let them go." A flicker of uncertainty crossed the soldier's face, but another cry echoed from behind, a stark reminder of the danger lurking in every shadow. Roman stepped forward slightly, whispering, "We're out of time." The tension between them hung thick, but Jake could see the cracks forming. He had thrown himself into the storm, and the fight within that soldier reflected what was happening all around them, a battle against the darkness of fear and hatred. "Please," Jake added, his voice softer now, grounding. "We can't forget humanity in all this. Don't let people be lost to this madness." After a heartbeat that stretched for an eternity, the soldier finally lowered his weapon fully. "Get them out of here," he ordered, his voice more resolute. Relief flooded over Jake as he turned to the civilians. "It's safe. Come on." He waved them forward, and in a moment of released tension, they surged ahead, eyes shining with newfound hope. Together, they rushed forward, Roman at their heels, ensuring they moved swiftly. As they slipped past the blockade, Jake couldn't shake the feeling that the danger was still very much alive. But he also felt a shift within himself, a deeper understanding of courage that was rooted in compassion. They maneuvered through a series of alleys, the stench of smoke mingling with the scent of fear, and finally, the distant promise of safety. The cheering silence of those they rescued offered a brief balm to the chaos. Yet, the pounding of heavy boots behind them echoed in his mind, a stark reminder that they weren't out of danger just yet. "Jake, we can't stay too close to this route," Roman reminded him, panting slightly. "We need to transition." Jake nodded, looking back at the civilians. He could see the strain in their faces, the raw emotion reflected in their eyes. They had made it this far, but time was slipping. Just then, a rumbling explosion shattered the air, sending a plume of dirt and debris into the sky. The civilians instinctively fell to the ground, but Jake shot up, his heart racing. "Keep moving," he shouted, determination surging through him once more. Adrenaline pumped as they picked up speed. Panic and purpose collided in his chest. He couldn't turn back now, not when lives hung in the balance. As they reached a tattered doorway that led to what seemed an abandoned building, Jake hesitated. Voices carried through the air, an unsettling reminder that there was no sanctuary in chaos. "Inside," he urged, pushing everyone through the door. But just as they ducked inside, Jake turned back for one last glance at the streets, a haunting tableau of desperation and fury. When he saw them, figures cloaked in shadows, moving closer, dark eyes scanning the scene. Fear surged anew, but deep down, Jake felt a flicker of resolve. They had come this far, and there was no turning back. "Jake!" Roman's urgent voice pulled him from his thoughts as the soldiers began to advance toward the doorway. "What if they find us?" Jake whispered, acutely aware of the new threat lurking just beyond their refuge. He realized in an instant that they weren't just facing external dangers, they were on the brink of a defining choice, a fork in the road that could lead to salvation or sacrifice. Would they be able to escape the clutches of the chaos outside, or would this refuge become their tomb? The fear of the unknown hung in the air, making it hard to breathe. Jake took a steadying breath, ready to face whatever came next. What lay behind that door might just mean the difference between life and death. And as the sounds of approaching footsteps closed in, he had to wonder, would they be able to protect these innocents, or would the world they were trying to save consume them all? The tension in the abandoned building wrapped around Jake like a thick fog, smothering his thoughts. The only sound was the pounding of his heart, racing almost in time with the footsteps outside. He took a step back, pulling the door closed just as the shadows loomed closer. "Are we safe?" one of the civilians, a young woman with tear-streaked cheeks, whispered. Her child, a small boy, clung to her leg, eyes wide with confused fear. For a fleeting moment, Jake wished he could give her a reassuring answer, the kind that promised everything would be okay. But behind him, Roman's expression told a different story. With urgency, he scanned the room for an escape route. "Look for a basement or a way out," he said, quietly but firmly. "We have to move again before they find us." Jake didn't want to leave the civilians in this place, but they couldn't afford to be cornered. A tiny crack of light peeked under a door at the back of the room. "Over there," he pointed. "But stay quiet." The civilians nodded, their fear palpable, and Jake took the lead, heart pounding against his ribcage. Every creak of the floorboards felt like a shout, echoing through the tense silence. Roman followed closely, his presence a silent reassurance. As they approached the door, Jake could hear them now, voices, harsh and demanding, scraping against his resolve. His throat tightened. What if they found them here? The thought of being trapped was suffocating. A sudden shout outside jolted him from his thoughts. "Search the buildings. They can't have gone far." Jake turned to the civilians. "We have to move now." He pushed open the door, revealing a dimly lit hallway. The musty air was thick, making it hard to breathe as they hurried down the passage. The echo of boots grew louder, closer, and Jake's feet felt heavier with each step. They dashed through the corridor, where fading photographs hung crookedly on the wall, memories of a life long gone. Jake felt a pang of loss as he passed them, remnants of happiness in a world that was currently torn apart by violence. Suddenly, Roman stopped. "This way," he hissed, pointing to a staircase that spiraled downward. They hurried down, heartbeats thundering above the sounds of chaos. At the bottom, a heavy door stood closed, its wood worn and cracked. Roman tested the handle, and when it didn't budge, he leaned his shoulder against it, grunting with effort. The door swung open with a loud creak, revealing a darkened cellar. "Get inside," he urged, ushering the civilians to follow. Jake hesitated, glancing back up the stairs. The soldiers would know they were here soon. Time was slipping through their fingers like sand. The civilians huddled together in the corner, fear etched on their faces, and Jake felt a wave of protectiveness surge within him. They were counting on him. "Roman," Jake whispered urgently. "What if they come down here?" "We'll fight," Roman said, fire in his eyes. "But we can't lose them. We have to keep them safe." Jake nodded, gripping the old railing for support as they braced themselves. He could hear the sounds of their predators above, shouts, curses, the metallic click of weapons. The urgency was suffocating. What if they reached the cellar? Would they be ready? "What if we don't make it out?" he asked, fear creeping into his voice, fear of failure, of loss. He glanced at the civilians, their lives resting on the decisions he made. "Then we do what we must," Roman replied quietly, determination flickering in his gaze. "We protect them until our last breath, even if it means sacrificing ourselves." The air felt thick with unspoken hopes and fears. They couldn't allow despair to grip them now. As Jake surveyed the frightened faces around him, a flicker of something ignited within him, a flicker of hope, of purpose. He couldn't let this be the end. The loud thud of boots echoed above, making Jake's blood run cold. They were coming. But just as anxiety spiked, a strange calm washed over him. They had each other, and in that moment, it was enough. He turned to Roman, resolve shining in his eyes. "We're not going to let them take us down without a fight." And in that fragile moment, together, they prepared for a confrontation that would test the limits of their humanity, the boundaries of fear. The tension thickened, waiting for the inevitable clash. Would they stand firm or crumble in the face of chaos? And then, somewhere in the distance, a new sound cut through the chaos, an engine roaring to life. Hope flickered again, this time as a beacon. Where was it coming from? Was rescue near, or was it just another cruelty of fate? The engine roared louder, tearing through the thick, suffocating silence of the cellar. Jake's heart raced again, a mix of hope and fear. What if it was a rescue? What if it was more of the chaos they were trying to escape? Jake exchanged a look with Roman. They both knew they had to make a decision, and fast. The civilians behind them clung to one another, their eyes wide with uncertainty. The fear in the room was tangible, and he could almost smell it, cloying and hot. "Do you hear that?" he whispered, straining to catch the sound again. The deep growl of the engine was unmistakable, a promise that there was movement outside. But was it the salvation they were praying for, or a prelude to their doom? "Maybe it's a vehicle," Roman stated, stepping closer to the cellar door, peering up into the dim light filtering through the cracks. "We have to be ready for anything. What if they find us before we can escape?" Jake whispered, the weight of his responsibility growing heavier by the moment. "What if it's them coming back to finish the job?" Roman turned, his expression resolute. "Then we fight. But we can't just sit here waiting for them to come to us. If there's a chance," he trailed off, the words hanging between them like a lifeline. The mother glanced at her child, her brow furrowed in distress. "But what can we do? We can't go out there." Jake felt a surge of empathy for her. She was scared, just like the rest of them, trying to protect what little she had left. "Listen," he started, his voice softer now. "We don't have many options. If we wait, they could trap us down here. But if we take that chance, we at least have a chance." He could see the flicker of understanding in her eyes as she nodded slowly, still clutching her son. "Okay, but we have to be quiet." "Right," Jake affirmed. "We'll sneak out the back. Roman, you go first and let us know. I'll follow with them." The engine noise outside seemed to pulse in rhythm with their urgency. They climbed the steps and pressed themselves against the wall, listening intently as the shadows moved above them. Jake's breath quickened. Every shout echoed dangerously close, amplifying their dread. "Now," Roman mouthed, his eyes sharp as he nudged the door open just enough to peek outside. Jake's heart pounded in his chest, fear mixed with adrenaline. He wanted to reach out, to take hold of both Roman and the civilians, to assure them everything would be okay. The need to protect felt almost instinctual. The sight beyond the door was like something out of a nightmare. Armed figures moved like anxious phantoms in the half-light, scanning the area with unsettling precision. "They're everywhere," Roman murmured. "Wait." Jake whispered intensely, forcing himself to focus. Something else was happening. The engine noise was sharper, mixed with voices, and it wasn't just the soldiers. "Is that?" he began, and as if in answer, the rumble of tires and voices grew louder still. It was more than just a vehicle, others were coming, something was shifting in their favor. "Look!" Jake pointed. A flash of headlights appeared in the distance, cutting through the dark like a beacon. It wasn't just a single vehicle, it was a convoy. "That's gotta be help, right?" Roman's voice was filled with an urgency Jake had never heard before. But before anyone could respond, everything changed. A loud explosion echoed from above, shaking the very foundation of the building. The light flickered and a cloud of dust filled the air. Panic swept through the group as Roman's hand shot out to steady Jake, pulling him back from danger. "What just happened?" Jake shouted over the chaos, his heart sinking. "Get down!" Roman yelled as debris began to rain down. In that moment, hope slipped from their grasp, replaced by a suffocating fear. Would the struggle for survival tear them apart? Jake turned to the civilians, looking for reassurance that they would pull through together. Would they really be able to escape this hell? As dust settled and the echoes of chaos faded, one question loomed larger than the rest: who had just arrived, and what did that mean for them now? The tremors of the explosion reverberated in Jake's chest, leaving a bitter taste of fear in his mouth. He quickly scanned the faces around him. The civilians looked trapped in their own web of terror, wide-eyed and breathless like deer caught in headlights. Roman was still gripping his shoulder, steadying him, but Jake felt his heart racing. This wasn't just a battle for survival anymore. It was a test of will, a measure of what they were willing to sacrifice. Who was it? He muttered, eyes darting back toward that broken door, the safety of the cellar now absorbed by shadows and dust. The hum of chaos above had shifted into something more sinister, punctuated by cries and orders. He felt the air thrum thick with uncertainty. That was too close. Roman's voice was low, controlled. "We can't stay here." He craned his neck as if trying to peer through the walls, but all they had was the deafening roar of engines and shouts. Jake took a deep breath, clutching at the remnants of his courage. "We have to move now." He felt the mother clutching her son tighter, her fear radiating like a pulsing wave. "Stay close to me," he urged, taking a step toward the door. He put a reassuring hand on the boy's shoulder, the little one quivering under the weight of it all. The civilians followed suit, slowly inching closer in tight formation. Roman led the way, his back straightened against the invisible threat above them. As they stepped outside, the world opened up with blinding light, leaving little time for their eyes to adjust. The sight was chaos incarnate. Smoke billowed in thick curls across the sky while distant figures moved with purpose, seemingly oblivious to the group huddled just beyond the debris. The faint sound of gunfire echoed off the walls of the surrounding buildings, each crack and pop sending jolts of adrenaline coursing through Jake. "Stay low," Roman shouted, diving behind a stack of crates. Jake followed suit, dragging the civilians with him. They pressed against the cold, unyielding metal, peeking out just enough to scan the area. The convoy illuminated their surroundings, its headlights cutting through the chaos like a knife. It drew nearer, revealing a line of vehicles, each marked with insignias that signified authority and power, but Jake couldn't shake the feeling of dread. Who were these new players in their grim game? "Is that help?" A shaky voice asked from behind him, full of a hope that was almost painful to hear. A vehicle pulled up, and Jake squinted against the brightness, desperate to discern friend from foe. As the dust began to settle, he could see the uniformed figures emerging from within. They looked different, fiercer. As they stepped onto the ground, their movements were assured, purposeful. Roman's voice cut through the fog of uncertainty. "We don't know who they are yet. We can't risk exposing ourselves." But Jake couldn't detach from that flicker of hope. What if they are here to save us? Before he could finish, an angry shout echoed through the air. One of the strangers raised a weapon, and the civilians shrieked, the sound clawing at Jake's insides. "Get back!" Someone yelled, the authoritative tone cutting through the chaos. Now, everything felt suspended in time. One choice could alter their fate forever. Jake felt the weight of the moment press down on him. They were standing on the edge of everything he had fought for. He had to make a split-second decision. Should they reveal themselves and risk everything, or was hiding their only salvation? The sirens blared closer, drowning out their breaths. Was this their glimpse of freedom or the beginning of a deeper nightmare? With every heartbeat, Jake wrestled with the uncertainty. Would he dare to step into the light, or would he drag them back into the shadows, choosing fear over hope? The choice hung in the air, thick and suffocating, just as a new explosion rocked the ground beneath them, sending all their resolve crashing down around them. Would this be the moment Jake would break, or the moment he'd finally reclaim his life? The dust settled around them, swirling in an almost hypnotic manner. Jake's heart pounded in his ears as he fought against the rising tide of panic. He could see the figures emerging from the vehicles. Their posture screamed authority, but something about the glint in their eyes felt wrong, like shadows flickering in the fading light. "Did you hear that?" They're coming. The mother's voice trembled in his ear, clutching her child to her chest. Jake stole a glance at the boy wide-eyed, his small frame shaking, that he looked back at Roman, who was tense, muscles coiled like springs. This isn't just chaos anymore, Jake. It feels different, calculated. Roman's voice was barely above a whisper, laden with unmistakable fear. The sirens grew louder, drowning out everything else, the wailing like banshees hungry for blood. They couldn't stay behind the crate forever, but Jake felt paralyzed. If they revealed themselves, would they be shot down? If they stayed, could they survive the next explosion that might very well come leaping from the darkness? Roman's voice pulled him back. We need to decide. Now. He could see the uniformed figures gathering, their attention almost hypnotically drawn to the chaos that crackled in the air. Jake's breath quickened as they grabbed weapons, speaking to each other in urgent tones. It was then a thin figure stepped forward, his demeanor commanding attention, and a chill slithered down Jake's spine. Jake, look! Roman hissed. Jake strained ahead, locking in on the man who'd just arrived. He felt an inkling of recognition deepen into dread. With every step the figure took, memories rushed at him, the laws they enforced, the order they demanded in a world that had spun wildly out of control. He realized they were here on a mission, and it likely had little to do with saving anyone. Are they? The words stumbled out of his mouth, caught in his throat. Roman nodded sharply, tightening his grip on his weapon. They hunt. We need to find a way out now. Just as Jake pulled away from the crate, he suddenly felt a hand gripping his arm. It was the frightened mother. Please don't leave us, she begged, voice cracking. Her eyes were pools of desperation, and Jake felt his heart twist painfully. Just stay close, he urged, his voice steadier than he felt. They had to move. The fear surrounding him was palpable, each pulse of uncertainty weighing heavier than the last. As they crouched low and shifted toward a narrow alley, Jake struggled to calm the racing thoughts in his head. A choice had to be made, and with every beat of his heart, the risk grew. Should they abandon hope or stand up for the lives they'd fought so hard to protect? In the moment of silence that followed, a shot rang out. It pierced the air, shocking everyone into stillness. The civilians flinched, instinctively pulling back, eyes wide like saucers as the bullet struck a nearby wall, showering them with dust and debris. Run! Roman shouted, adrenaline pouring into his veins as he surged forward, pulling Jake along. They darted into the shadows of the alleyway just as the chaos erupted in the open. Jake's heart raced not just from fear but from the surge of determination trickling through him. He felt a shift, an awakening of something that had been scarce in his life lately. They wouldn't go down without a fight. They could still make it if they stayed one step ahead. But the cacophony from the street seeped into his bones like ice water, freezing the unwelcome doubt that crept into his mind. Ahead, he spotted a dim light filtering through a crack in a door. Was it a way out, or would they find themselves cornered once more? How do we know what's on the other side? Roman whispered, barely audible over the commotion. Jake's gaze locked onto the light. We can't let fear decide for us, he breathed. With one last look behind them, Jake made his choice. They had to take that chance. As he pushed the door open, hope and uncertainty collided within him. What lay beyond could change everything for better or worse. Would they find help or face an even darker reality waiting on the other side? The door creaked as Jake shoved it open, the light spilling into the gloom around them. It felt like a lifeline, but the darkness snarled at his heels, reminding him of the chaos they had just fled. Jake stepped inside, pulling the others with him. The scent of mildew and something metallic hung in the air. Where are we? The mother whispered, her tone laced with anxiety. She held her child tighter, as if he could shield her from what lay beyond. I don't know, Jake answered, his voice firm despite the uncertainty. But we can't stay out there. They huddled in the small, dimly lit room, catching their breath. Roman pressed his back against the door, straining to listen for any signs of pursuit. The muffled sounds of the outside world faded slightly, but tension hummed in the silence, a warning siren in his mind. What if they find us here? Roman muttered, eyes darting toward the single window, its glass cracked, offering a glimpse of the chaos outside. This might just be a dead end. Jake surveyed the room, taking in its starkness. Old crates lay stacked along the walls, and a heavy metal door loomed at the far end. It had to lead somewhere. They had to make it through this. He felt the weight of responsibility pressing down on him. "Let us try to find another exit," he said, glancing towards the mother as she sat cradling her child, who buried his face in her shoulder. Jake could see her fear reflected in the boy's bright eyes. "We need to keep moving." Just then, the quiet was shattered by the sound of footsteps approaching. They were unmistakable, sharp and deliberate, sending a wave of panic through the room. Jake's heart raced. They had to act fast. "Quick! Over there!" Jake pointed to the crates. They crouched behind them, hearts thumping as the footsteps grew louder. Roman's grip tightened around his weapon, a silent promise that they would fight if they had to. The door creaked open slowly. A figure stepped inside, silhouetted against the dim light. Jake barely held his breath, praying it wasn't one of them. The figure looked around, eyes scanning. "Nothing here," a voice called out, a harsh whisper that sent chills down Jake's spine. "Search the next room." They exhaled softly, tension draining for the moment, but Jake knew it wouldn't last. "We have to move, now," he urged, his voice steady, but laced with urgency. They darted from behind the crates, moving toward the heavy door in the back, urgency propelling them forward. Jake glanced over his shoulder, eyes darting to the figure rummaging in the room behind them. Time was running out. As they reached the door, Jake pressed his ear against the cool metal. He couldn't hear anything on the other side. It could be another empty room, or it could be a trap. "We have to take the risk," he said, glancing at Roman, who was already nodding. On 3, 1, 2, 3, he twisted the handle and pushed the door open just wide enough for them to slip through. They were met with a narrow hall lined with rusted pipes and damp walls, but it was a path forward. The smell of smoke wafted through, sharp and acrid. "Stay close," Jake whispered, the sound of their footsteps echoing off the walls. They moved together, each step taking them further from the chaos, yet deeper into uncertainty. Suddenly, a loud crash erupted from behind, shattering the brief calm. The figure had discovered their absence. Panic surged as they picked up the pace, the hallway seemingly endless. "Do you think there's an exit?" the mother asked, breathless with fear. "I don't know," Jake admitted, each word a weight as they pressed forward. "But we have to find it." They pushed ahead, the sound of shouting growing louder behind them. As they reached the end of the hall, they came to an ancient door, the wood worn and creaking with age. Could this be their escape? Or was it another trap waiting to spring? "Jake, wait!" Roman pulled him back, eyes wide with caution. "We can't just charge out there. What are we stepping into?" Jake glanced behind him, dread pooling in his stomach. "We don't have a choice, we can't turn back." He took a breath, steeling himself. The choice was made. With one final push, he swung the door open to reveal what waited for them was a scene more chaotic than he could have ever imagined. Would they find salvation or be plunged deeper into danger? The door swung open, revealing a world engulfed in flames. Jake's heart sank. The street ahead was a battlefield, chaos and destruction playing out like a nightmare. The acrid smell of smoke thickened in the air, mingling with the fading sense of fear, despair, and a flickering hope. People dashed frantically, some wounded, others erratic with panic, vying to escape the turmoil. "Jake!" Roman's voice broke through the clamor, quickly drawing his attention. Roman was watching the civilians, his expression taut with concern. "We can't stay here." Jake felt the pressure of the moment weighing heavily on him, the futures of the civilians resting squarely on his shoulders. We need to find high ground. Somewhere we can see what's happening. He cast a quick glance back at the terrified faces behind him, the mother clutching her son who stood pale and trembling, wide-eyed at the chaos before them. Follow me, Jake urged, his voice breaking through the madness. They pushed into the street, where the light from burning buildings danced like a sinister partner in the ongoing chaos. With every cautious step, they navigated the throngs of people, each face a mirror of desperation, each heartbeat echoing a plea for survival. They hurried through sways of panic and confusion, seeking a doorway that loomed in the haze of destruction. Jake's gut churned. This wasn't just a fight for his life anymore. This was an entire human story unfolding in the worst of circumstances. Suddenly, a group of armed men rounded the corner, eyes scanning and searching for anyone who dared defy their authority. Jake quickly ducked behind a wrecked vehicle, adrenaline pumping. Everyone, stay down, he whispered urgently. As time felt suspended, Jake pressed his fingers against his temples, steeling himself against the present horror. The soldiers moved closer, their movements predatory and calculated. Each second stretched out, and Jake's mind raced, formulating impossibilities. Then, in that fateful moment, Jake's eyes fell upon a fire escape ladder scale at the side of a building. His chest tightened as hope flickered. There. We can get to the roof and scout a way out, he whispered, glancing at Roman, who met his gaze with fierce determination. The plan struck like a bolt of clarity. Finding a way to safety was all they had left. Jake led the way, rushing towards the escape. He reached the bottom rung, hoisting himself upward while urging the civilians along. Come on. We have to move fast. The pounding of his heart matched the chaos below. Roman helped the civilians ascend, encouraging them to keep climbing as explosions echoed ominously in the distance. When they reached the roof, the world spread out before them, an urban abyss, filled with smoke and shadows, the battlefield transformed into a jigsaw of destruction. Look! Jake breathed, pointing. That alley might lead to a side street. We can escape. But just then, a reverberating explosion lit the sky, sending shock waves through the ground and knocking Jake off balance. He narrowly caught himself, glancing over at the civilians. They were frightened but resolute in their shared purpose, fueled by survival instinct and solidarity. Jake, we need to keep moving, Roman called, his voice booming above the din. They rushed toward the edge of the building, adrenaline guiding their every move. Jake took one last look behind, remembering fondly the stories of valor that had once filled his heart with pride. But he was no hero defined by ideology. He was a man reborn into empathy, a compass pointing towards humanity's better potential. As they moved towards the alley, safety felt closer, yet the threat was still real. An echo of shouts and gunfire hung over them as they reached the edge. They quickly ducked down, momentum surging, hearts pounding like tribal drums. Now, on my count, Jake whispered fiercely, trying to maintain focus. The civilians rallied behind, their hope mounting like a tide. 3, 2, 1 now. They raced across the rooftop, leaping down to the safety of the alley. Jake's breath caught as he saw the scuffle erupt in the chaos ahead. An armed soldier confronted by a ragged group of civilians attempting to flee. Stay back, one of the soldiers shouted angrily, pointing his weapon threateningly. Jake held his breath, fear washed over him for everyone involved. He could see it in their expressions, the fight, the will to survive. This was more than a simple conflict, it was a horrifying realization of how far they could be pushed. Jake, we can't hide forever, Roman urged, edging closer to the confrontation. We need to find cover. Panic surged through Jake, but instinctively he knew he had to act. Time was slipping away, and lives hung perilously in the balance. Roman, cover me, he cried, charging out into the fray, feeling the weight of every choice he made pressing behind him. He was no longer just Jake, a soldier molded in a world of war. He was beaming truth, standing to protect the innocent, the hope that lay behind bruised faces. "Hey!" he shouted, drawing every set of eyes toward him. The scuffle paused momentarily, uncertainty rippling through the air. "Put your weapons down. They're not enemies. They deserve better." His heart thundered in his chest, shocked silence ensued. Jake's words hung between them like a bridge across chaos. The soldiers, faces frozen in confusion, hesitated. "Jack, fall back!" Roman shouted, but Jake held firm, standing endearingly against the gusts of despair. The soldiers exchanged glances as Jake caught sight of the civilians peeking at him, disbelief blossoming within their eyes. "Come on!" he pushed, conviction fueling his voice. "You can choose a better path." He saw the fear in their eyes morphing slowly to soft resolve, then, something shifted. One soldier lowered his weapon, eyes softening as anguish surfaced. "What the hell are we doing?" he murmured, glancing back to his comrades as awareness ignited in them. In that moment, as chaos loomed closer, Jake witnessed a ripple effect. The soldiers had begun looking at the civilians with the weight of truth emerging. The humanity present could forge a new present from the ashes of pain. The moment had arrived, a collective potential where division faded, a realization that hope was beginning to transcend the rhetoric of conflict. "Release them." Jake's voice broke through desperation, resonating not just for him but for all who stood within the ruins of madness. He felt immense pressure unleash, a wave of liberation flooding the air. The moment hung on a precipice, still frail yet full of potential. "They are not your enemies," Jake shouted with fervor. "They're simply people seeking safety." One by one, eyes flickered with understanding. There was still fear, but with it came the possibility of change. Those frightened soldiers stood down, weapons slowly displaced to the ground while civilians surged forward, overwhelmed by emotion. Jake stepped backward, sensing the tide shift. Together, the soldiers and civilians stepped closer, their breaths mingling in shared hope. Together, he whispered, tears pooling as he felt love triumphing against despair. "We can rise." And as the chaos swirled around them, a new story began to take shape, a legacy fashioned with courage, empathy, and unity. That day, humanity reclaimed its voice in defiance of despair, woven across a battlefield turning into something greater. This was their moment. Would they seize it and redefine what bravery truly meant? As the sun burst through the smoke, glistening in a radiant hue, hope soared high, reaching out to a world waiting for transformation. This was just the beginning. You need to subscribe now to witness this extraordinary transformation. Don't miss out. This is the moment to show your support. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and keep these heartfelt stories alive. Comment below how this ending made you feel. Your reactions matter. And don't wait not even one more second. Share this video instantly with at least 5 friends who need to feel this hope. Together, we can spread love and strength as one passionate community.